you do. It's not fair to keep running those things back and forth. You did a nice job of that, too. Thanks. Well, welcome. I'm really glad to be here. I know you probably are all sick to death of your snow flurries, but it's really beautiful yesterday. I appreciate having a little snowfall. Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself to start out with, and then perhaps I can open it to some questions and answers if you like. I was born and raised in Reno, Nevada. I'm a fourth generation from Nevada. My great-great-grandfather used to drive stagecoach from Reno to Virginia City during the gold rush. I grew up there my whole life. Came from a divorced family, which I like to talk about a little bit because so many people think that's always a negative, and I consider it quite a positive, as a matter of fact. My parents were divorced when I was 4, and I lived with my mom. My father lived in southern Nevada. But now I realize I felt my whole time growing up that I had two families above me. I never heard a negative word from either parent about each other, so I really realize at this day and age how difficult that is. But I had two families that loved me and felt that I was raised with love and principles and morals and a good work ethic and a concentration on education and schooling, so I don't consider that a negative at all. When I graduated from Reno High School, I had a decision to make about going to college, and that was a really big decision because where you go is very important and what you're going to be doing the rest of your life. All my life I wanted to go to a girls' school. And my dad used to say to me, well, you know, you don't have any brothers, and it's real important to get to know guys as just friends, so I don't think you should think about going to a girls' school till at least your college age. So by the time I reached my senior year in high school, it was time to start really considering where I wanted to go to school. I was accepted at Stanford, which at that time was quite a feat because they didn't allow many girls into Stanford. And I was also accepted to Mills College, which was a women's college in the San Francisco area. And I was having a difficult time making up my mind. I really wanted to go to Mills, but the fact that Stanford had accepted me was quite a deal, so I thought maybe I should be doing that. Sometime in February, a admissions counselor from Stevens College in Columbia, Missouri, walked in and talked to our class, and I just went along to hear what they had to say. And that was it. When I heard what Stevens College was and what it offered, that's where I wanted to go to school. It also was further away from home, which was also a very big factor at that point. I felt that I could go away and not have to come home every weekend, since San Francisco was so close to Reno. Stevens College is an all-women's college in Columbia, Missouri. It's a small school. And I entered Stevens College as a pre-med major. I originally wanted to be a ballerina. I took 12 years of ballet and wanted to dance. That's what I wanted to be. And by the time I became a sophomore and junior in high school, I developed joning of knees. My knees started dislocating, and I couldn't dance anymore, nor could I take any physical education classes. So when I went off to Stevens College, I had been a pretty good student in math and a pretty good student in science and biology. So when I arrived at school, my concept of where I was going was pre-med. I took a lot of science courses and really loved it. But instead of taking a PE course, because I couldn't, except I did take canoeing and I did take archery, neither one of those required. After that, there wasn't much I could do. So I took a theater course as my outlet, so to speak. And almost the rest is history, because my counselor at Stevens talked me into changing my major when I graduated from Stevens. At that point, it was only a 2-year college. So when I graduated from Stevens, my selection of my next college depended upon their theatrical program. And I transferred to the University of Washington in Seattle, where I received my BFA in theater arts. Actually, I entered the Miss Nevada pageant for the Miss America pageant when I was a junior in college, and I did it because I was asked, they kept saying, why don't you do it? And I thought, well, I'm a theater major, and I should see what it's like to get up in front of 1 million people and retain some composure, having no thought at all that I would go in. Well, I did. I won Miss Nevada, which is no big feat. There's only 3 cities in the whole state, so there were probably 6 girls competing, I don't know. But I won it and participated in the Miss America pageant, which was a fabulous experience. It isn't a beauty contest. It is 50 girls trying to get ready to do a show from all over the world, all over the country, I mean, all of their talents, and you spend 4 days working real hard to get that production that goes on the air up and out and in the best possible shape it can be. You don't have time to feel much competition. You don't have time to do anything but your best. One of the philosophies my father passed on to me as I left, which I try to remember, is only do the best job that you can do. You've got to give it your best. If you're worried about what your competition is, then part of your concentration is over here worrying about your competition. All you can do is the best that you can do, and if you're doing your best, that's the best you can do. And you can say, well, I did my best. If you're worried about everybody else, you're only giving about 50%. And I remember that along the line, because, you can't be the best at everything, but if you give your best, you try. From University of Washington, I graduated and decided I had two choices, New York or Los Angeles. At that point, it was the only place where you could really earn a living in this craft. And most of the stuff in New York was musical comedy. So, since I couldn't sing and dance very much, I decided to go to Los Angeles and try my luck there. I was very, very lucky, but I also was very well trained. I had a terrific education. I had a terrific sense of self, both from Stevens College and University of Washington. Stevens more so, I think, because it gave me the sense of who I am. Being with all women, I had no fear at all of being able to accomplish what I wanted. And being far away from home, it gives you a chance to sort of develop who you are. So my first audition, I got. I went out and auditioned for something and got it. Kind of went to work right away doing not necessarily even small parts. I had a lead for the first couple things I did. But as I was saying to one of the newspaper girls interviewing me this morning, I was typecast. And typecasting is a real benefit. I know if any of you are theatrical theater majors, you understand it's much more fun to play a lot of other characters, but if you are typecast, you are the best at that, whatever that is. I was the perfect ingenue. Big round face, big round eyes, poor little dad was going to leave her boyfriend, cheated on her, all those little plots that were going on. Had I come into the marketplace probably 10 years later, when it was the late 70s and all the Vietnam War and all the protests going on in college and all the free love and all the drugs, most of the guest star stuff were girls that were a little offbeat, a little bit more interesting than the typical ingenue. So I'm not so sure had I entered college at that point, entered the business at that point, would I have been able to compete as well. I might not have been so lucky. But I was very lucky, went to work right away when Gilligan came to pass. If you notice the credits at the very beginning when we were in black and white, it said "and the rest." I'll explain why "and the rest." The professor and I have been "and the rest" for 30 years. We keep sending each other flowers and cards saying "love the rest." But what happened was, the original pilot film was made with 3 different characters. They were 3 school teachers. And when CBS purchased it and decided they were going to make a series out of it for sure, they thought those characters were a little dull, so they recast it all. And they made a farm girl, a professor, and a movie star. And everybody tested in New York and Los Angeles. My agent called me and said, here's a role, go try out for it. And I tried out for it, and then they brought me back, and I read again for the producer, and then they brought me back, and I read again, and then we talked wardrobe. And then they said, okay, we're going to put you in front of the camera and see what happens. So there were about 250 girls testing for Marianne, 250 testing for just about everybody. And they would mix and match you. I started testing on a Monday, and by Thursday they kept saying the part's yours, but no contract had been signed. And they mixed me up with different professors and different gingers to see how it all worked out. Thursday afternoon, about 3 o'clock, guess who walked in to test for Marianne? Raquel Welch. Well, I said, that's the end of me. This beautiful girl with this beautiful body, with this beautiful smile, came in to test for Marianne. Well, she didn't get an idea. I don't know whether they offered it to her and she turned it down, or whether they thought she would have been a better ginger or what, I don't know. But Ginger got cast in New York City. Tina Louise got her part in New York City and was cast before they made the decision between Russell and myself. And when she was cast, her agents negotiated that she would be in 5th position billing, which means Gilligan, the skipper, Howell, and the movie star. She was number 5. And her position was number 5 and nobody after her. So by the time the professor and I got cast, the contracts were signed and there was nothing they could do but put us at the end. After the first season and after they realized that the 7 of us were going to be marooned for the rest of our lives, they then changed the credits so then the song read Professor and Marianne. Doing a show like Gilligan's Island is very difficult. It was a film. It was not like it is today where you get in front of an audience and you have a chance to rehearse for a week and then do it in front of a group of people that can laugh back when they think you're funny. Doing a comedy with a laugh track is very tough. We don't hear the laugh track. We do what we think is funny and hope that by the time you see it, you think it's funny. It's a lot easier doing a comedy with an audience because you get the feedback. So we started work at 6 in the morning. We finished sometimes at 7:30 or 8:30 at night. Usually 2 days a week we were outside. Usually in January they had me in the water. Never in July when it was hot enough. Usually in January they thought it was clever. Let's do some scenes in the water. I learned a great deal from everybody on the cast because I was pretty brand new. I learned all about the makeup and the camera angles from Ginger and Tina. She was a big movie star. She did God's Little Acre and some wonderful things, and she knew all about that kind of stuff. I learned comedy from Jim Backus, from Natalie Schaefer, from Bob and Ellen working together. It's an interesting blend of characters in Gilligan's Island. You will see the Laurel and Hardy that happens between Bob Denver and Russell and Alan Hale, the skipper. You'll have that wonderful Billy Burke kind of foggy quality that Natalie Schaefer developed, and then of course you all know Mr. Magoo with Jim Backus. So everybody was very eager to share, to tell you how things could be better. Everybody was very eager to make the series work. No one had any concept at all that we would still be out there 30 years later. We are the longest running show in the history of television syndication. We have never been off the air since 1964, and we are in 30 languages right now. I can't go any place in the world where somebody isn't yelling my name in some language or waiting for me from somewhere. And I told the story a little bit earlier. I'm kind of an adventuresome person. Some of the ladies from Stevens College, some of my graduates, some of my alums, and a couple of faculty have climbed the mountains of Rwanda to view the mountain gorilla. And about 3 years ago, we went to the Solomon Islands, where we went from island to island by canoe with just a National Geographic photographer and a guide and 5 women. And we arrived on the island of Sulafu, which is a wonderful little island made out of coral reefs with all the huts up on stilts and no running water and no electricity and exactly what you expect to be in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Gosh knows I've spent a lot of time there. And as our little canoe arrived up to the shore, the chief's wife looked at me and went, "Oh my gosh, I know you." Now, no running water, no electricity. We are in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. She had been on the island of Honiara, which is where World War II had some battles, and she had been on the island of Honiara in 1972 or 4 and had gone to nursing school and used to come home from school and watch Gilligan's Island. So, of course, I sent a postcard to our producer and said, "Well, we're marooned out here somewhere in the middle of the Pacific, and they know about us anyway." From Gilligan's Island, of course, it's a little difficult to break that image. I was talking to Steve Winsenberg a little bit earlier about the Marianne image is very strong, and she's a nice girl, and it's very important to me to keep that going. There is not a Marianne on television today. There is not much of a young girl role model. A lot of kids growing up. I think the role model age is no longer the teenage stuff now. I think it's a little bit earlier. During the Gilligan's Island stage, I think sort of the kids sort of looking for guidance for the teenagers. I think it's kind of gone down a little bit. But what we have out there now is the 90210s and that kind of stuff, which is fun and entertaining and interesting, but you don't sort of have that steadfast morality and that work ethic that Marianne sort of became famous for. And the reason I'm so aware of it is I was doing a personal appearance for Sears right after the show went off the air in Houston, Texas, with about 350 young women, age 8 to about 13, that horrible puberty age where you don't know who you are and you look awful and you don't know what you want and mom doesn't know anything and all that kind of stuff. And there were about 300 young women who were there to learn posture and poise and manners and all that kind of stuff. And we all visited for a while, and then the counselors left me in the room with these 300 kids. And all of a sudden, these young women started asking questions about sex and drugs and abuse, studying habits, and all of a sudden I was very aware that what I had to say to them, they were really listening to. Because there is a time in your life when you don't think your mom and dad know it all. You realize later on they did, but there's a time in your life when you don't listen. And I was very aware that those kids listening to me that day were really paying attention to what I was saying. So I was very conscious of what I had to say. I think is important. So I have taken the responsibility of being very careful of what I lend my name to. I don't lend my name to something that I don't believe in or that I haven't researched or haven't dealt in and looked pretty thoroughly. I've been involved with a great deal of charity work as I've gone on through my life because I think God has been very good to me and I have been very lucky. I've worked very hard, but other than the regular stormy parts of life that we all have, I've been pretty fortunate. So one of the things that has happened to me since Gilligan's Island is becoming involved in a volunteer program a lot. One of the things that I'm connected with is the Children's Miracle Network Telethon, and I know you all have it in Des Moines or in the surrounding areas where all the money stays and is raised for the Children's Hospital running the community. And because I'm a graduate of Stevens, which is in Columbia, Missouri, the University of Missouri Hospital asked me 12 years ago, would I become part of the program and be one of the hosts? So for the last 12 years, I have hosted and co-produced the Children's Miracle Network Telethon for Missouri. And because of that, I've become so involved with the hospital there and their children. I'm unfortunate, I don't have any kids of my own, so I think there's a little bit in all the female core of all of us that are female, that there's a nurturing process that needs to be kind of worked on a little bit. If you don't have kids, it's sort of out there, you don't know what to do with it. So my involvement in the hospital is twofold. Being pre-med when I entered school, there's a real interest in that medical stuff. And I have become acquainted with some fabulous children that are terminally ill or that are just recovering from things with the courage and the spirit and the faith that you wouldn't believe. I've become acquainted with some fabulous doctors two incredibly genius women, a neonatologist who was the first neonatologist in the country. That's preemies, that's little babies that are only a pound or two that are born. And also a pediatric surgeon. Most of the time, our miracles that happen that you see on television, it's something instantaneous that you see. There's wonderful doctors with cancer and diabetes and all those things. But usually the miracles that you hear about, it's usually a surgeon that's done something miraculous. And I've become very good friends with a female surgeon by the name of Dr. Mary Alice Hellickson, who the first time I met her, she was 9 months pregnant. And the second time I met her, she was carrying her baby on her back, making around. She has 2 children now, and she's incredible. They used to make her leave because she'd be asleep in the halls waiting to see little baby Andy wake up. But she hadn't liked the way Teresa looked last night, and they couldn't get her to go home. She has allowed me to watch surgery. She has allowed me to be in the operating room where she's operated on a 4-pound baby with an incision only this big. And I don't know how she can do it. See the little inside she takes out and works on it. They're all so small. I don't know how she does it. I've seen her climb up on a table with a little baby that she didn't think was breathing right. Yes, I'm face to face with a baby this big. I've seen her care and carry on to such an extent that having to give a baby back to a mother that didn't care about the child or was abusive to the child almost killed her. She wants to keep them all. And this last year, I've had an experience with an incredible husband and wife team at the University of Missouri. Craniofacial team. Dr. Des Moines and Dr. Connie Baroni. And she was his boss when they met. She was the head of surgery at Cornell University. He came in to get his degree in neurosurgery, his residency, and they ended up operating together on the operating table. Both had been in love with somebody else, and by the time the operation was over, that was it. They fell in love and they are now married. And I can't think of anything more wonderful than being married to somebody that you love for many, many reasons, and yet you're sharing the same common goal in life. He's a neurosurgeon, she's a plastic surgeon, and they take babies with deformed heads and faces and reconstruct them to make normal little heads and faces out of these children. And you've seen pictures of children where their heads go to the side and they have a lump on one side of their face and their eyes become at an angle because all the muscles constrict. And they can make these children look like regular, normal faces. It's just incredible. They let me watch a surgery last April on a 4-month-old baby girl that was all little lumps and bumps and everything in her little head. And the parents weren't prepared. They thought they'd have at least a year before they could have to face the surgery. But the skull closes so very quickly that they wanted to get in and do this before the skull closed. And I am 2 feet from watching the surgery with these 2 people. And they cut the baby from ear to ear and they pulled her face down. And they took these 2 bones and cut them in half and took them out. The neurosurgeon did that. Then Connie took the bones, and they look like chicken bones that are real thin and she couldn't see through. And she took these little bones, and she took a little drill, and she took a little emery board, and she took a little sandpaper, and she played with these 2 bones, and then she put them back on the opposite side. And she turned them around, front to back. And she pulled the baby's face up and sewed the baby up, and the baby's head was perfect. And 4 hours later, she nursed from her mother. And here this couple goes the month of January to the Philippines and does it for a month for nothing. All the children over there that need help. Because of my involvement with this hospital, my life has become much more full. And I'm going to just tell you a quick little story about a girl that changed my life so much, a young woman by the name of Missy Braden. And Missy Braden was about 17 when I met her. She came from Poplar Bluff, Missouri, and she was in the University of Missouri Hospital with cystic fibrosis. I only thought she had asthma. She never told anybody what was really wrong with her. But Missy had courage and guts and will and faith and an eagerness to be like everybody else, unlike any child I've ever seen. It took us a while to become acquainted, and it took Missy a while to admit what was wrong with her to me. And one day she said to me, "Let's have a cup of coffee, Dawn. I want to talk to you." So we sat at one of these little coffee shops and we're having a cup of coffee, and she said, "You know, I want to tell you what it's like to have known since I was 9 I was going to die." And I said, "What, Missy?" She said, "Yeah. I was going to school, and one of the little kids said, 'Well, what are you studying for? You're not going to live to get through high school. Why are you even bothering to go to school?'" So she said, "I ran all the way home and said, 'Mom, is that true?' And my mother sat down and explained what cystic fibrosis was." Well, Missy became a role model for so many people in the hospital. She would go to mothers and say, "Let me help you with your child. Let me help you with your little child with cystic fibrosis. Let me help counsel them. Let me help give them the spirit and the will to go on." Or she'd say, "Don't put them in a respirator yet. Give them another day and see if it'll work." Missy wanted more than anything to go to college, so I established a scholarship in her name at Stevens. She was a born-again Christian with faith like you wouldn't believe. She had courage, she was smart, she was an optimist, and she worked so hard at keeping herself as good as she could be. And about 2 years later, the head pediatrician said to me, "You know, Missy's not going to make it. This is so bad, I don't think that she's going to make this." I don't think she'll look beyond this view. There is only one possible solution, and it's a very, the odds are very, very long, but they are doing some experimental surgery with heart and lung replacements. So if Missy is interested and then qualifies, we will propose that to her. So Missy said, yes, let me try anything. And she flew out to Palo Alto and went to Stanford and went through the process to see if she could be accepted, and she was. And about 4 months later, Missy's mom packed up her little pickup truck full of all Missy's belongings and her little pink motor scooter that Missy used to drive around in, and took her to Palo Alto, took the car to Palo Alto. And Missy couldn't drive that far, so Missy with her little oxygen tank boarded a plane and came to me in Los Angeles, and we spent a week to 10 days together in Los Angeles before she moved up to San Francisco with her mom. And she was there for 4 months with 4 false alarms. So 4 times she got the call saying, you got 45 minutes, come on. And 4 times they said, sorry, haven't got a match. One afternoon in the middle of March, she got a telephone call, and she and her mother were cooking dinner for the minister that they were having for dinner that evening. And Missy answered the phone and said, this is it. She found the donor, come in. We have 45 minutes to get here. So Missy took a hold of her mother's hand and she said, Mama, I'm not sure I can do this. And her mother said, honey, you don't have to. If you don't want to, that's okay. It's all right. And she said, Mama, will you pray with me? So they held hands for a minute and they started a prayer. And she said, I don't know what happened. I don't know whether the phone rang or the doorbell rang or whatever. But Missy said, that's okay. I'm going to go take a shower. And they went. She took a shower. She asked her mother to bring her here. She had this beautiful long French braid. And in they went. Missy asked the entire hospital over the intercom to stop and say a prayer for the donor's family, who could have a child. She asked the entire hospital to say a prayer for the nurse and the doctor's hands to be saved. And I have a shot of the cooler, the little igloo cooler going into the operating room for the heart and lung. Missy's parents were divorced and hated each other, didn't speak, didn't like each other. And I sat between this mother and father for 8.5 hours of surgery as sort of a sounding board because they had to talk to somebody. The doctor came out after 8.5 hours and said if I had had any idea that Missy's lungs were this bad, I never would have done this. Her lungs were cemented into her body, and they had to chisel them away from her ribs. They were so atrophied. In a couple of days, she had a relapse and started bleeding again, and they took her back in and operated again. And then for the next 3 months, Missy got better and better and better. And she walked the halls, she was on that respirator, she did every little thing the doctor told her to do, and I visited her every single weekend. June 19th was her birthday. And by the time she'd gone from intensive care to her own little room, she was able to walk from the hospital to her mother's little apartment, which was about 2 blocks away, and celebrate her birthday. Of course, she had to come back to the hospital that night. Well, in a couple of weeks, Missy started developing rejection. And they had to put her back in intensive care, and they had to put her back on the respirator. She never quit. She never gave up. She walked every day. She was full of hope. She believed in her heart she was going to make it. One day I was in Chicago, and Missy's mother called me and she said, Dawn, the doctors have given Missy 48 hours to 2 weeks. There are no lungs left. They don't even know how she's existing now. So I said, Jean, I'll be there. And I flew in that night. And I was so upset because I believe in miracles. And I believe in medical treatment today. And I believe with the optimism and the faith that all those things behind you, you have the capacity to help yourself heal. And I couldn't understand why she wasn't going to make it. So I called a psychologist friend of mine in Los Angeles and talked at great length with her. And she said, Dawn, somebody's got to give that child permission to die. Someone's got to say, it's okay, Missy. If you want to go on, it's all right. You've fought a hard life and you've been a brave little girl, but sometimes we can't do it all. So I said, I can't do that. It's got to be her mother. So I put her mother in touch with the doctor, and the two of them conversed. And when I walked in the next morning, Mrs. Mother met me at the door, and she said, we had a conversation with Missy yesterday. And the minister came and we talked to her. And Missy sat right up in bed and said, I'm not going. And she said, we all didn't know what to say, and we prayed with her for a little while. Pretty soon she reached her hand out and she touched the minister's hand and she said, you're right, and I'm ready. So the next morning I walked in and Missy was kind of comatose and her eyes were closed and she was in bed, and I walked up to her and took a hold of her hand and said, Missy, you know, you've changed my life. But you being part of my life and my witnessing your courage and knowing you. Your 20 years on this earth has meant more to this world than most of the people in their 90s. Your light has shone throughout this world and will always be a light for me to follow. And I consider it a privilege and a pleasure that I have known you, and you will never be out of the hearts of those who met you and been around you. And we will always love you. And she opened her eyes and she took hold of my hand and she said, yeah, I'm going to be your guardian angel. And she's on my shoulder. She's with me whenever I see kids like you who have an opportunity of going on and are healthy and have an opportunity of schools and things with your futures in ahead. And when I see to you, don't screw up with the drugs and the alcohol and the partying. Take care of that body that is wonderful that God gave you and do something with your life. This child did more with her health, failing for so many years, to still make a mark and change what this world has to be. And today we're in so many troubled times. There's so much with gangs and drugs and abuse and stuff that's going on, and it's all in your hands. From now on, it's up to you. The next 20 years are left to you on what's happening in this world. One of the things that I'm most grateful about, I've done Gilligan down and I've known all over the world, and people come up to me and say, aren't you doing well, Dr. Mary Ann? Well, you'll see in just a few minutes I'm going to show you one or two little samples of my clothing, but we talk about my clothing a little bit. And I had a grandmother who had a stroke and was paralyzed in a hospital room for a very long time, and my mother took care of her at home. And I had a friend in a nursing home for over 11 years that I used to go visit, and I realized with Missy, who used to help me design these clothes and wear them for me, tell me what was comfortable and all of those things, there is a need out there for everyone who is a little impaired or infirm to feel better about yourself, to feel better about healing, to feel good about yourself. Because we all know our minds play a great deal on how we study, how we feel. Look at the athletes, how they have to psych themselves up to that very last pitch of that World Series. And the whole game is in this ball, and it's all up to you. How do you get past that? Well, it's all our mental capacities. And I feel so grateful that I have had the opportunity of maybe giving back something to the world. I was in a taxi cab with a cab driver, and he said to me, aren't you doing well? And I thought he was going to say, I'm here from Mary Ann. And I said, yes, I am. He said, I just want to thank you. I've had a mother with a stroke for 2 years, and I've been dressing her in your clothes ever since. So I was on stage one day doing a play, and I thought, I'm getting in all these costumes awfully quickly with Velcro. Why in the world can't we create something for somebody who has a difficult time dressing, but that doesn't look like that awful hospital gown? So I went back to Stevens College, which has a great fashion department, and said, I'm going to try something different. I'd like to see if I could create some kind of a clothing line for people who have difficulty. How do I go about that? So I had the design. They showed me how to go about getting fabrics, and I started. I started with a catalog by myself, going to a cutter, getting pieces made, taking it to a sewer's, and in fact, the little girl that was helping me, we used to put our fabric in garbage cans. We'd go buy brand new garbage cans with the little wheelers, and we'd reel them up and down the Los Angeles street, taking the fabric from the cutter to the pattern maker to the sewer. Until finally, about 2 years ago, when a manufacturing company came to me in St. Louis and said, I'd really like to do your clothes. You want to do it? So I went to them. Then I went with a catalog company out of Chicago called Enrichments, where the clothes can be found today. And just 2 months ago, JCPenney called me and said, we really like what you're doing, and we think what you're doing has a little uplifting feeling for people that are infirm, and it's not industrially, doesn't look like an institution. So we would like to start with your clothes. So sometime in August, I believe, the Penny's Home Health catalog is coming out. I'm just going to show you, we have two darling students who volunteered to model this adapted clothing, so don't make fun of them. We have, I forgot your names already. Carla, all right, and your name? Sarah. I'm going to talk to Carla first. I'm just going to bring you up here, Carla, for just a second. I'm just going to show you the principle of this dress. This dress just looks like everybody else's dress if you were a little older and a little frumpier and had a little problem. Here's a pretty dress that you could wear to the doctor's office, or you could sit at home and receive company, or you could just wear it all around. But the key is, I'll just let you open the front rather than me. Just open the top button and just don't expose yourself. Just show them. It is Velcro. It is just simple buttons. That's right. Simple buttons, four little things, six little buttons, six little pieces of Velcro. So anybody that's infirm, who can't dress themselves, who's recovering, who has a cast on their arm, who's paralyzed on one side, can get in and out of that very easily. Thank you, Carl. And it's machine washable. Then this is a little bit too short for her. She's a little bit taller. We got a small size. It should be almost her ankle. So we like her shoes. We thought the shoes would be really great with this outfit. I didn't want her to feel self-conscious. This is a design that a lot of my garments are. And just turn around for just a second. It is opening in the back with a piece of Velcro, right here and right here. If she could not dress herself, the caregiver, she just had to lift her arms a little bit, and the caregiver could dress her. If you will note the design, if you turn around, she's able to wear the dress turned around completely with the buttons in the front and the Velcro coming down this side. So as she gets a little better, and as her hands and fingers are a little bit more mobile, as she's recovering from surgery or whatever, she can also put it around and open it down the front. Thank you, ladies. You don't have to be here any longer. I just wanted to show them a little bit about what's happening. And before I finish, I would open it up to some questions and answers, but I'm just going to tell you kind of what I'm doing with the rest of my life. I'm still acting. I did a play last year, a brand new play called Surprise, Surprise. I have just optioned a play from a wonderful young playwright in Atlanta, Georgia. It's called A Higher Place in Heaven. And I'm planning to do the role myself on stage and to produce it if I can, either as a movie or a movie of the week for film. I have written the Gilligan's Island Cookbook. You're going to get a chance on the way out to buy one if you like. It's $13, but the proceeds go to the Missy Braden Scholarship Fund. I have the scholarship fund in her name, so anything that you buy today will go towards that scholarship. It's filled with family recipes, 3 generations of my family. I'm a good cook. My mother and both my grandmothers were great cooks. It's filled with Gilligan's Island stories, things about what went on behind the scenes, some pictures you haven't seen, some trivia questions, etc. And the names are really stupid at the recipes, but the food is good. I've been asked to write a second book, and I have 2 books I'm not sure which one I'm starting first. It's Islands of the World or Islands of America, a travel book. I was going to start with Islands of the World, but the hurricanes took out a lot of the islands last summer, so I think I probably will start with the American version. I'm in the process of producing a Gilligan's Island retrospective for one of the networks, perhaps Spectrum. And it will be a behind the scenes of what went on when we filmed the show, because the Gilligan's Island movie will be coming out in another summer or 2. So this is timely. I'm in the process of merchandising some Gilligan's Island merchandise. I've invented the Gilligan's Island game, and I think we're going to possibly put it on CD-ROM. So in addition to my clothing line and the acting field, I'm busy doing lots of other things. And one of the things that's most important to me is coming and talking to students like you. As I said, being on the board at Stevens, I get to see what's going on all the time and what your questions and problems are and what you're all facing and how education is kind of having a hard time economically. So I'm very much in support of what Mr. Lindenberg is doing about bringing people in and talking to you. So I'll shut up for 2 or 3 minutes because I bet somebody wants to know what Gilligan is really like, or what Hollywood like, or something. So are there any questions from anybody out there? Yeah?
What was your favorite episode?
What was my favorite episode? Well, we as actors always like to do the dream sequences best because we got to be other characters. So there was one on the other morning that I saw, the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde episode, where I got to kind of play an Eliza Doolittle character with that wonderful Cockney accent. I like that. As far as looking at the show overall and determining what episode I liked the best, I thought the Hamlet that we did with Phil Silvers was wonderful. As a matter of fact, the New York Shakespeare Festival last year wanted to open their season doing the Hamlet, and Mr. Turner, who owns Gilligan's Island, wanted $40,000 worth of royalties to do that, so they did not do it. And then there was also one other good plot. Rory Calhoun was a hunter, and he hunted all the famous animals in the world, so he now was going to try a human. I thought it was kind of good. Really wasn't a comedy, it was kind of tragic. Anybody else? Any other questions? Yeah.
Okay, now, Bob Denver wore the same shirt every
Every
episode. Did he have a lot of those shirts? Was it one shirt? Did that shirt ever get washed?
Very washed and ironed all the time. It's interesting because Sherwood Schwartz, our creator, believed in a comedian in the comic role, and so did the skipper wore the same clothes, being identified with the same outfit all the time. Like the Charlie Chaplin, who always wore the little thing. He always thought that was part of it. So it was in his mind that these two would always be dressed the same. The number one question asked around the country is, where did you get all the clothes? So the answer that I come up with, you can believe somebody's serving on and serving off, you can believe this. You heard this little bit of a clip about we all came with a few little suitcases. The professor had a suitcase, Mary Ann had a suitcase. The Howells would carry everything they owned with them if they could. And since Mary Ann cooked and cleaned, she probably sewed, and she probably revamped a lot of the Howells clothes to fit everybody else. That's my rationalization. Anybody else? Yeah.
Did Mary Ann have a crush on Gilligan? It always looked like she was starry-eyed.
Well, she kind of, Mary Ann was sort of kind of starry-eyed anyway, doesn't she? And you always wonder who they would pair you up with. I get that question asked all the time. Nobody in the right mind would really pair up with Gilligan, I don't think. But Mary Ann, I think, kind of felt for him, I think, because he always getting in trouble. And I think the professor was probably the one that I really would have gone for, but that's probably a little too sophisticated for Mary Ann. So Mary Ann's still out there, never forget. I just watched that one episode where Gilligan got kissed. He didn't get kissed that often. I didn't realize in that rescue they really let a kiss on him, didn't they? He was always knocking himself out when he did all the suits. Getting palm treat or something. Anybody else? Yeah.
Why did the house bring all that money for a 3-hour tour?
Because they would never be without their money no matter where. The producer always said the Howells were the kind of people that if they didn't have it, they'd go like this and it'd be dropped from a plane to them somewhere. I guess if you have that much money, I don't know. Anybody up there? Now, a lot of you kids from high school? Yeah, go ahead.
Do you prefer doing live performances like on stage over doing like a TV show?
Do I prefer doing live on stage? Yeah. I'd much rather do a play than anything. What I like about the theater more than anything is, well, three or four things. I've been able to do a lot more interesting characters on stage than I have on film. Number two, I adore the rehearsal time. I love that 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it is you get to rehearse, to take the chances and to develop and to experiment, which you can't do on film. I also like the audience reaction that comes right back. So I really do prefer doing stage. The difficulty in stage is if you're touring a long time with a play, I've done a play for 8, 9, 10 months, you're doing the same thing night after night after night, and to make it fresh and new and believable is a challenge. But if you've got a good cast that you're working with, you never do it by rote. You're always responding instantly, and things happen every day that change the line readings a little bit. Film is the most difficult because film is shot out of sequence. You might have this big rape scene in the middle of a play where you're scared to death and you're being attacked. You may do the lead up to that scene the first day of shooting, and you may not do the scene for 6 weeks. And you have to remember, what level did I hit to match when I go to do it the next time? And that's very difficult. It's much easier to do a play from the beginning to the end if the writing is good and the writer develops the character as it should. It's much harder to do garbage, by the way. It's much easier to do something well written. You look at some of these shows that are really awful and you say, oh gosh, that's the hardest thing is to do something that's so bad. Anybody else? Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about how things have changed in the way of what you see on TV now with talk shows and sitcoms and so
Yeah.
forth. Are you active at all in trying to change that back to the way it was a little bit, getting away from some of the skin and language?
Yeah, it's very hard, and you don't really have much influence. You try, and you do have a choice, they say, of turning it off, and you have a choice of finding, but I think that's the reason the Brady Bunches and Gilligan's Islands are still out there, because there is a need for that kind of programming, without it being totally juvenile. I think we're trying with these rating systems now. I think we're trying to kind of do something. I think the pendulum always has to go too far before it swings back. I do think there's some very good stuff on the air. I think there's some wonderful. Mad About You is my favorite show. I think it's wonderful. I think the acting is superb. I think the writing is very funny. I'm hoping more of that develops. The Family Channel, I guess, is being watched a great deal. You do have that choice of switching off to that. And now there's so many cable stations coming from everywhere. What really offends me is this cable access. It isn't government controlled at all. I was in New York City about 2 years ago and got into a hotel. I was always going to do Geraldo or something. And I did a red eye and I flew in and turned on the television. And here in a hotel room was probably the worst thing I've ever seen. Absolutely, I'm not going to tell you what was on the air, but I was so shocked. I called 2 friends of mine in New York City and said, what is this? What is this? Why is this allowed on television? He said, that's access. If you pay for the time, you can show what you want. You got to do something like that. That's what that is. Yeah.
With your line of clothing, do you make clothing for men also?
Yes, I do make clothing for men, and we have some wonderful Levi's and some pleated pants and things that have waistbands here that open on both sides so that if you're incontinent and wearing any kind of diaper or if you're wearing any kind of a bag or a colostomy or anything like that, that it would not be shown. It's trying to look like regular clothes. Yeah.
Where was Gilligan's Island shot?
Gilligan's Island, the original pilot, was shot on the island of Kauai, off of Hawaii, which I was not involved in, of course. Once it was purchased and picked up and sold, we were on the CBS lot, which was CBS Studio Center. It's now MTM Studios. The sound stage that we filmed on is now the Roseanne sound stage. And the first 2 episodes we tried to film at Malibu, but it was so foggy that we only got an hour or 2 worth of work done a day. So CBS came in and built a huge lagoon with a waterfall that a boat could go in and out of, and it was deep enough to swim and all of that. And last January, they cemented it over. They made a parking lot. Just so that's all like concrete in that pretty lagoon. Yeah,
We saw that clip of the Gilligan's Planet cartoon.
yeah.
I haven't seen those since I was a kid, so I don't remember. Were all the voices the same?
Except I did both Ginger and Marianne.
Oh.
There were 2 cartoons. There was a Gilligan's Planet and another one. Another one was first. And they had one woman doing all three with them. Mrs. Howell, Ginger, and Mary Ann. Then this one, they brought me in to do both Ginger and Mary Ann, but the rest of us were all the same. All the original people, except for Ginger. One more question. Yeah.
You still keep in contact with anybody else?
Yeah, you know, the skipper's gone, and the Howells are gone. And Ginger, Professor, and Gilligan and myself are left. And Gilligan and the Professor and I are just real buddies. We talk about once every 10 days on the phone. And we've been doing personal appearances together for the last 2 or 3 years. And it's family now. As a matter of fact, we were all ensconced in our mothers and kids and all of that. And it's nice, because a lot of times you hear bad stories about people who didn't get along and all of that. We love each other. It's very nice. Well, I appreciate you having me today. I hope you had a good time.